Welcome to this special edition of Eco Africa, all about urbanization. Today we are looking at the value of sustainable urbanization, drawing on examples from Africa and Europe. I am Sandra Twinovideo here in Kampala, Uganda, and I am of course joined by my co-host in Nigeria. Hi Chris.
Hi Sandra. Both of us live in cities here in Africa that are growing fast. More and more people are leaving the countryside in search of opportunities. Now things can get a little crowded at times, and that puts a strain on the environment. Today we're going to look at where the problems lie and which challenges need to be mastered. Here are just some of what's coming up. What to do when water becomes scarce. Cape Town seeks to adapt to drought by diversifying its water supply. What happens to the environment as more people move to the city? We hear from the United Nations agency, UN Habitat. And from garbage to gold, the Ethiopian capital is using the mountains of trash to generate power. The movement of people is the driving force behind urbanization. Most people move to the city in the hope of finding a better life. They may be fleeing the effect of climate change or persecution, or seeking a better place to implement their ideas. But more people living in the cities also means a greater strain on the environment in those areas. We'll begin with our eco check to bring you some facts and figures.
Gray is eating into green. More and more land is being covered in concrete and asphalt. Urban areas currently occupy some 2% of the world's surface, the landmass of Russia and Brazil combined. UN studies predict cities will take up twice as much space by 2050. If population growth stays at the current rate, it will have dire consequences for all. More than half of us already live in urban areas. By 2050, that's expected to be true of 70% of the world's population. Cities are spreading outwards. In Asia and Africa in particular, more and more prime arable land is being developed. By the end of this decade, we'll see the loss of an area as big as Germany. The steep rise in migration to cities is also impacting living conditions. More shanty towns are springing up without proper sanitation or electricity. Traffic volumes and CO2 emissions are increasing, and the amount of waste too. Some 2 billion tons of garbage are produced worldwide annually. By 2050, that amount is projected to double. Global warming is fueling extreme weather events. The pressure on urban ecosystems is growing. Increasingly, people are realizing that cities have to be made greener and more sustainable. In megacities, urban farming is beginning to take off, along with rooftop and vertical gardening. Citizens are doing their bit, cleaning up rivers and recycling plastic. And in industrialized nations, cities are turning to intelligent traffic systems and sustainable mobility. CO2 emissions could drop 30% in cities if more cars were shared, for example. But even then, the environmental impact of continued urbanization will present challenges for the leaders of Africa's rapidly growing towns and cities.
Something needs to be done for sure. Many cities and conurbations are already feeling the effects. The impact of climate change is especially noticeable in South Africa, with heavy rainfall in winter and extreme heat waves the rest of the year.
That is right, Chris. In 2018, Cape Town almost reached day zero when the authorities would have been forced to turn off the taps during the long dry periods. To prevent any repeat of that scenario, the city is now investing heavily in water management.
At Sandfleet, the construction works are in full swing. The wastewater treatment facility on the outskirts of Cape Town is currently being upgraded financed through a loan by the German Development Bank. For Sunfleets, the upgrade is long overdue. The foam on top of the wastewater is a clear sign that the plant is struggling.
Currently, the plant is designed to treat 72 million litres of water a day. The flow into the plant is on average about 90 megalitres. So you can see that the plant is overloaded in terms of the amount of flow that it's receiving.
Flashback to 2018, due to a severe drought, Cape Town dams had run dry. Residents queued to stock up on drinking water. Day zero was looming. Through strict last-minute water restrictions, Cape Town escaped the catastrophe. For City Councillor Zanthia Limburg, the water crisis was a learning experience.
The city did learn very important lessons from the drought. One of the key lessons is the need for us to not be entirely or solely dependent on surface water from rain filling our dams, because there's a risk of future rainfall patterns remaining very low, and we have seen this being the case for the last 5 winters. And so we do believe that it is necessary and critical for the city to diversify its water supply, and this is one mechanism in which we will do so through wastewater.
Through the upgrade, Sunfleet will be able to treat an additional 18 million litres of wastewater. The end product can be used for multiple purposes.
The effluent quality that will come out of this plant won't be potable, but it will be to a standard where it can be used for industrial purposes, can be used for irrigation purposes.
Future droughts and a fast-growing population are major challenges for the water supply in Cape Town and surrounds, especially in informal settlements. Poor water infrastructure puts the health of residents at risk. Solomon Zongsi is the community leader of the Langridge settlement. Contaminated water that is running through the streets is a big problem here.
At the end of the day, all this grey water you see, it offshoots to the stormwater pipe. The stormwater pipe shoots straight to the river. The river feeds the dam where we get our drinking water, you know. So it means municipality should do as much to clean the environment, find a way, a solution of the community not to get ill or get sick, you know.
Only a few kilometers down the hill, scientists are trying to solve some of these issues. At the Water Hub, researchers test natural processes to treat contaminated runoff from the informal settlement. Water expert Kevin Winter initiated the research site.
We're really not putting enough resources into our wastewater treatment works, into our water provision and into our drainage, because the drainage is where the vectors for the disease are starting to move. And so here's one example where we're actually intercepting some of that water from what is effectively drainage, somewhat further downstream, and cleaning that water up and using that water safely then to irrigate gardens.
Stones and carbon sources such as pitch pipes act as biofilters and clean the water of bacteria, nutrients and heavy metals. These nature-based solutions require space but present a useful addition to conventional treatment plants. Cape Town has learned the hard way. Only by investing in its water infrastructure can the city be fit for the future. The upgrade of Sunfleet is scheduled to be finished by 2023.
But a lot more is needed to equip our biggest cities for the future. The United Nations Human Settlements Program works to promote sustainable urban development. So what does that mean exactly? And how could it change our lives? Eco Africa met with Uma Cilia from the group's regional office for Africa.
Good morning, guys. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you.
How are you doing? I'm fine, I'm fine. Census revenue of the county. Africa is less urbanized, but the rapid trend of urbanization. Today, 2020, we are talking about 600 million of people living in cities, which constitute 40% of the population. And by 2035, we'll have 50% of population living in urban settings. Look at Africa, sub-Saharan, 54% of population live in informal settlements without water, sanitation, green energy, and others which are really at risk in terms of infection. The deficit in Africa in terms of infrastructure is billions of dollars. Yet we have to do it if you want to keep those people in this particular area. And that's a major question today. We're facing this challenge of increased population and poor infrastructure system as well. How Africa and cities can deal with climate and environmental issues for now. It's obvious. We are driven by something and attracted by something, which is jobs, health system, basic infrastructure. If you don't have it where we are in the village, what are we going to do there? People are looking for better job and better employment. They're also looking for access to basic services. Climate change, of course. What happened in Mozambique will push people to go to the cities, of course, because they are not safe. This is happening recurrently now, every year. So what are they going to do there? But also we have conflict, pushing people to come to the cities. Look at what happened in the Sahel regions. People are fleeing from rural areas to come to the cities because that's where they can find peace. I'm telling the authority, you are overloading those cities. Those infrastructure, let's take it to other cities and bring jobs and opportunity for people to be there instead of just concentrating everything on one city. You heard about this program of UN Habitat and Public Space and Greening, which is more about, allowing cities to have such a consideration to the green and trees when it's come, to planning, but also allowing people to get out houses and get access to those green areas for health system, but also for social reason in terms of integration and social cohesion. We are putting the emphasis more on secondary cities to find a territorial balance, but also to lessen the pressure on big cities so that people will have access, to basic services. They can have access to water, sanitation, health system, school, where they are, instead of needing to come to big cities. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Do you know the feeling of being in the middle of the city and the heat just becomes unbearable, with not even a breath of fresh air to cool you down? It's because so-called heat islands build up between the buildings, and it's another problem of city life in the era of climate change. Let's look at what happens.
Urban heating is the name given to the so-called heat island effect. Temperatures in towns and cities rise more sharply than in the surrounding areas because of the density of streets and buildings and the many people, cars and trains, all of which produce heat. Spread over the year, the mean air temperature in inner urban areas is around 1 to 3 degrees Celsius warmer than areas outside them, or large green spaces within them. On top of this, town and city centers often cool down far less at night because the building density doesn't allow cool air to move around the city. On hot summer nights without a breeze, the temperature difference between a city and its surroundings can be more than 10 degrees Celsius.
So what to do about this? Ramping up the air conditioning is not an eco-friendly solution, as we all know. But there are a number of sustainable ways in which towns can prepare for extreme weather. In Germany, steps are being taken to protect cities both from extreme heat and massive rainfall with the help of nature.
These young trees, fresh from the nursery, are being planted in a new residential neighborhood complex in Hamburg. The leaves on some look wonderfully green and fresh, especially when compared to these beech saplings. The Spätz alder is a hybrid species bred from Japanese and Caucasian alder with many beneficial characteristics. Bernhard von Ehren says when it gets hot, the pores in their leaves close to retain valuable moisture.
We haven't planted many of the Spätz alder yet. It's new here, a climate change tree, a city tree of the future. We still have to see how they fare in urban settings. My suspicion is they're far superior to native species.
Climate change is playing havoc with cities around the world. One reason many cities can't deal well with heavy rain or floods is that so much city surface is covered by concrete and water can't seep into the ground. Environmental scientists complain that this ceiling effect means half of all rainfall is lost compared to woodlands and meadows and not available to people or nature.
Rainwater that's channeled straight into drains and carried away is gone. It can't evaporate, and it's removed from the natural water cycle. Evaporation cools the air, and we feel that. All the sealed surfaces heat up a lot and stay hot if there's no cooling effect from evaporation. That's one reason we get urban heat islands.
An alternative approach can be found in southern Berlin, in a neighborhood where sponge city water management principles have been adopted. Here, rainwater is collected on open ground and roofs and channeled into local pools. It doesn't just disappear down the drain and get whisked away. Hanna Krüger is a hydrologist who works for Berlin's own municipal water company think tank.
Rainwater is a very valuable resource. We need it to adapt our city to a changing climate. That's why our goal is to manage and use it locally.
The entire project takes up 10 hectares. It's full of unpaved surfaces, strips of garden, and the roofs here are also covered in soil and plants. Lots of opportunities for rainwater to be soaked up and slowly released into the air or ground.
Rainwater seeps directly into the ground between the paving stones, or it flows into little depressions in the ground, like this one. That's why there's a gap in the curb. And that water sinks in, or it evaporates, thus benefiting the trees.
Bernhard von Ehren set up his climate COPs 5 years ago. His heat-resistant trees can't do entirely without water, but it will take time to find out just how much water they need and how well they adapt.
We're still in the early stages. We're testing 61 species of tree, seeing how they fare. We've been growing some of the species for decades, so we already know their strengths and weaknesses.
His nursery has so far raised 10,000 trees new to Germany's urban landscapes, but better able to weather climate change. Trees like the Turkey oak, a new climate tree which is being introduced more frequently into Hamburg's neighborhoods. All of which should make for some pretty cool cities.
One huge challenge with urbanization is the growing amount of garbage. Here in Lagos, we produce an estimated 10,000 tons of trash every day, and only a small amount of that is disposed of sustainably.
Things can get pretty smelly in the city, and more than that, disease can spread and water supplies become contaminated. A huge problem sometimes requires a huge investment. Ethiopia spent millions setting up a new power station in Addis Ababa, and get this, using garbage, the plant supplies a quarter of the city's households with electricity. Sounds like two problems solved at once.
This incineration plant, called REPI, is the first of its kind in Africa. It produces electricity for Ethiopia's capital city. Every day, around 2,000 tons of garbage are delivered here. 2/3 of that is burned. First, the waste is stored at the bunker for 5 days to release moisture. Then it is burned at a temperature between 800 and 850 degrees Celsius. Chemist Sintayehu Melaku has been working here since the opening of the plant.
The trash come in and burn it. After that, it will be heat the water. The water will create steam. That steam rotate the turbine. The turbine generates electricity.
The filters of the incinerators are made to EU standards so that as little pollution as possible leaks into the air. That makes it more eco-friendly than open burning of waste on landfills, which is still common in African countries. The plant was built on parts of the former Koshe dump site at the outskirts of the city. The director, Alemayehu Neme, says that Koshe served for about 50 years to discard the waste of Addis. His administration has transformed the dump site into a managed landfill. This keeps away fires and bad odor through waste treatment and gas venting.
There are a number of wastes that is never accepted by this waste to energy because they are not burned, so that those wastes which cannot be burned and which can danger this facility will be disposed on the landfill.
The Repi incineration plant was constructed and funded by an international consortium and the Ethiopian government. It provides electricity to around 25% of households in Addis Ababa.
It is low capacity, 25 megawatt, but it is contributing for cleaning the city. It is contributing for adding some energy to the system. So it will serve as a model for other cities to cleaning the city.
Of course, coal-fired power plants or gas facilities are more efficient in making electricity than this incineration plant. But this waste-to-energy system is not only generating electricity, it is also saving land space, preventing the release of toxic chemicals into groundwater and reducing the release of methane into the atmosphere.
Getting around in megacities is often a grueling business and can take hours. Dar es Salaam in Tanzania has been growing fast, sprawling steadily outward to cover more and more land. It is now home to over 5 million people. Traffic is a nightmare and the air dreadful. Now the city is starting to tackle the problem by developing a rapid transit bus network. More than 100 kilometers of new bus routes are planned for the coming years.
There was a time when it will take up to 2 hours for Salum Eid to get from his house to work in the morning. Although he lives within the city limits of Dar es Salaam, he was dependent on daladalas, minibuses, that are the most common means of transport here. They are usually jam-packed before you even get on. Everyone is squeezing together. The other problem is that there are so many traffic jams and you spend a lot of time just sitting and waiting to move. It's also exhausting. With more than 6 million inhabitants, Dar es Salaam is well known on its way to becoming the next megacity in Africa. In the next couple of years, the population is expected to balloon to 10 million. Ronald Lokatare heads one of the agencies tasked with adapting and improving infrastructure.
People were experiencing a lot of congestion, and their infrastructure was also, some of it was not very good. So many hours were lost being on the roads while going to work in the mornings and in the evenings when people are going back home.
One solution, a bus-based rapid transit system with a network of dedicated bus lanes that bypass much of the traffic across the city. The system so far stretches around 21 kilometers and has already cut travel time for some residents in half.
When we considered all the options, the bus systems appear to be easier to implement in our city because of its lower cost as compared to the train system. And we also looked at inclusivity, because when you bring in a bus system, most of the people who are working in the daladalas could be absorbed into the new bus system.
The Tanzanian project was supported by the Institute for Transport and Development Policy.
Before the BRT came into Dar es Salaam, public transport service was provided by heavily polluting minibuses. And the BRT was able to replace 3,000 of those vehicles with 140 high-capacity buses that all meet a much better emission standard.
The new bus system has been a blessing for Salum Eid, and he's just one of the many thousands of passengers who now cut their commute by 50 hours a month. Before I felt bad because I was always getting home so late. The kids will be asleep by the time I arrived. But it's so much better now. I get to spend time with my kids, look over their homework, play with them a little, because the rapid bus gets me home so much faster. Once the project is completed in 2035, a network of 6 lines will cover around 130 kilometers. Until then, Salum Eid and other residents of Dar es Salaam will have to rely on daladalas for at least some of their journeys.
That's it in this special edition on urbanization. Thank you all for joining us. Well, if you're currently doing something to protect the environment, we would like to hear from you. So please do get in touch with us on our social media platforms. I am Sandra Twinovidio signing off from Kampala here in Uganda.
Thanks, Sandra. Do join us again for another edition of Echo Africa next week. From me, Chris Alems, it's goodbye from Lagos, Nigeria. Take care and see you next week.